And welcome to this meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee. Hearings regularly require that the hearing should take the form of a discussion led by the subcommittee. The process these hearings, which is set out on the reverse of the agenda paper. Without equal time. So, exercise my discretion to allow additional time if necessary, taking into account the requirement to allow what is equal maximum time. Only those points contained within the written representations, supplementary documents, can be considered. Now, can we just make sure that everybody is here?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I'll do a very quick roll call. Councillor Layman, I can obviously see and hear in front of me. Councillor Gordon-Smith, could you just...
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. And Councillor Bento.
Yes, present.
Would you also like me to do a quick rundown of officers?
Yes, please.
Present. So thank you, Chair. So in the room with us this morning, we have from licensing team Brian Applicant, from the legal team Fiona Sutherland, from Democratic Services we have Dave Shaw and myself. Joining us online we have also from Democratic Services Claire Buchanan, and from Environmental Health we have Phil Tidlich. That's all the officers I think we have present, Chair. Just to let you know, we've also been joined by Joe Fellows and Cliff Morris. And finally, I can also see that Councillor Murphy has joined the call.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
The subcommittee has read all the written comments on the application which are included in the report, and I understand that the following persons wish to address the subcommittee. Okay. Consider relating to the 4 licensing objectives: prevention of crime and disorder, public protection of children. The subcommittee will also have a regard to the national guidance and the council's licensing policy. If I can call on the licensing manager. Right. Okay.
Would you like me to introduce the report, Chair?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. So this report is agenda item 1, which begins on page 5 of your report bundle. The application grant of a new premises licence under section 17 of the Licensing Act 2003. On and off the premises between the hours of 9 AM and 10 PM Monday to Sunday, and between the hours of 9 AM to 2 AM on New Year's Eve. However, the applicant has amended their application to propose that alcohol supplied for consumption off the premises is limited to a start time of 11 AM rather than the previously applied for 9 AM. This amendment was made in response to a representation received and has been included as a proposed condition in section 5 of the report. The application also proposes the provision of regulated entertainment in the form of live music and recorded music. However, please may I remind members that both live music and recorded music are deregulated between the hours of 8 AM and 11 PM if they occur on premises licensed for the sale of alcohol for consumption on those premises. Deregulated means that they don't require a licence, and that means that we would not be able to apply conditions to any deregulated entertainment. The full application can be seen in Appendix 1 to the report, which is pages 19 to 41. No representations have been received from responsible authorities, although I understand that we have a representative from Environmental Health here in an advisory capacity. Conditions were agreed between the applicant and Hampshire Constabulary during the consultation period, and those are also laid out in section 5 of the report. Representations were received from 5 other persons, all of which were against the application. But please be advised that since the report was published, Councillor Jackie Porter has withdrawn her representation. Her representation was shown on page 43 of the report bundle, and we should no longer be considering this in the determination of the application. The remaining full representations are set out in Appendix 2 to the reports, pages 44 to 47. These representations primarily relate to the licensing objectives of the prevention of public nuisance and the prevention of crime and disorder. Members are reminded that they may only take into consideration matters which relate to the four licensing objectives. May I also remind members that only those other persons who have made written representation may address the subcommittee, in addition to the applicant and, if required, our representative from Environmental Health. If the subcommittee were minded to grant this licence, there are conditions set out in section 5 of the report to consider, and the subcommittee may reword these as they feel appropriate in order to promote the licensing objectives. I welcome any questions that you might have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Gordon-Smith, have you any comments or questions on the officer?
No, I don't.
Councillor Bento?
No, nothing at the moment, thank you.
I think that's well covered, and thank you for the report. Would we like to have the applicant or his representative address?
Good morning, Chair. My name is Cliff Morris. I'm the representative for the applicant at this particular hearing. I have been in discussions with the applicant since we received the papers from the local authority, and the applicant would confirm that the request for off sales is no longer part of their application. So if from now we could deal with the question of off sales as being removed from the application, that would be, I think, pertinent at this stage. I would also indicate that although whilst this is an application for a new licence, the premises have been licensed in the past. The previous holding company for the Coffee Lab group went into liquidation, which meant that the existing premises licence for this particular premises lapsed. This meant that obviously they had to make a new application for a new licence, and in making the new application they quite rightly put in things that they thought would develop in the future. Hence, even though, as you've heard from the officer, that the requirement for live music is effectively not an issue because in the hours that they're proposing it would be unregulated, knowing that there is still the possibility of noise nuisance criteria being applied to that, they felt it pertinent to put that in at this stage so that there were the opportunity for those persons to be able to comment. Although I would indicate that live music is not currently part of their business plan, it was just to try and put everything in. So if you're minded to grant the licence without the live music element, even though, as you've heard, it's unregulated, my clients wouldn't object to that either. As I've said, the premises is actually, or has had, the benefit of a premises licence for certainly over 10 years in terms of time, 3 to 4 years whilst Coffee Lab were actually in place, and prior to that I can't remember which pizza company it was that owned that particular site, but it was owned as a pizza company with a restaurant licence. Conditions were removed in 2018 by Coffee Lab when they took that premises over to stop alcohol being supplied with a table meal. Now, I would say that my client's clientele is quite well established, and what they found in the past and why they're reapplying for the licence now is, whilst they're primarily a coffee hub, as stands by the name, the intention is that they sometimes have people that come in that just want to sit down with their friends who are having a coffee, and they want a beer or a glass of wine or a gin and tonic, for example, and they want the opportunity to be able to serve that to clientele in the premises. It is not their business model to become a de facto small niche pub. It is their business model to be able to supply the clientele with their needs, and their primary facility and their primary requirement is as a coffee place that also serves, I don't want to say food in the sense of table meals, but also serves, you know, food. I hate the phrase light bites, but it appears to be the one that unfortunately comes into the most appropriate terminology for what they intend to do. So quite simply, to reiterate, the application is effectively for the renewal of an existing premises license, but because it's a different company, it has to be a new license application, the old one having lapsed on liquidation. We're removing the requirement for off sales because there isn't really a market for that, and that's not something they would anticipate. Their clientele is well established over a period of time, and they want to continue to serve them in the way that they have in the past. Essentially, Chair, that would complete the application. If there are any questions, then please feel free to ask me. I'm quite happy to deal with those as and when I can.
Cass, have you any comments? Or you'd like to ask any questions?
Councillor Bento, are you still on the call?
Yeah, I'm still here, thank you. Sorry, I'm having a slight difficulty there, but I am here. Yeah, can I just ask a question, please, Chair?
Please do.
Yeah, I did do a little bit of research. I did come and visit the premises the other day so that I could see what was happening there, and I did go online. It seemed to be that to me that Coffee Lab has a well, there's very little online to describe what the company does, but I'm sort of fairly reassured by your suggestion that it is essentially a coffee company, and that's it. But there's very little else online. Is that because of the recent COVID pandemic? Is that? I'm just concerned about it being, you know, existence as a company.
It's partly, as I said, the original holding company for the Coffee Lab chain, if I can call it that, went into liquidation. So they're being sort of restarted. So obviously the old website went with the old company. So it's in the process of rebuilding a new website, putting everything together in those terms. So at this stage, yes, it is fairly basic. But as I say, it's been in the square for at least 3 years. I actually did the license back in 2018. And if you'll pardon the historical note here, we had the devil's own argument getting the license off the pizza company. But that's a totally separate issue and something with which you're not concerned. But so quite simply, Coffee Lab itself has been in existence, and it's not in the ethos of the way they're taking matters forward to change the way that they've run in the last 3 years. But the lack of online presence, if I can call it that, is, yes, it's due to the liquidation of the old holding company and indeed the pandemic, meaning that their online presence isn't quite as they would have it as going forward in the future.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Goldsmith, have you any comments?
Could you confirm, you said that you weren't applying for an off licence now?
That is correct, Councillor. The provision for off sales has been withdrawn this morning by me.
Oh, right. Okay, thank you very much. That's all I wanted to know.
Thank you.
Yes, I mean, the only comment that I would like to ask is it's unusual for a coffee shop to want to carry on until 2300 in the evening. And is this going to turn into a wine bar in the evening?
The intention is to keep with the continual business practice, and indeed, given their current footfall, it's not anticipated that the licence will actually be utilised till 11 o'clock each night. But again, with everything, it's easier to make an application for everything and then not utilise it than it would be for making an application for, shall we say, for the sake of 9 o'clock in the evening, and then having to try and increment it one at a time as times come forward. So it goes back to what I said at the beginning, that the application is very broad brush at this stage to cover all of their objectives, but the main business requirement has always been for the provision of coffee and associated products, and the reason for the alcohol application is that they do find that some people are still sitting there at their current closing time nursing a coffee and want to carry on, and they're having to be turfed out, if I can put it that way. And therefore they want to be able to sort of still cater to that market, but also cater to the market that don't want caffeine that late at night. So no, the intention is not to turn it into a wine bar. The intention is to keep it exactly as it is, but have a facility that broadens the brush of what they currently serve.
Yeah. Where are we next?
The responsible authorities, Chair.
Right.
I think you're moving on to the responsible authorities.
Yes,
Chair.
the responsible authorities. Thank you. We have no comments from those people, I believe.
I'll just remind you that you've got Gil Tidridge on the call,
Yeah,
so
I was about to-
to advise you.
Yeah. Could I ask Mr. Tidridge to make the points about this, please, on the licensing of the music, etc.?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, there's two applications we're considering today. Some of the comments I think you've asked me to make are pertinent and relevant to both the applications. You've already heard from your licensing officer that some of the concern relating to live and recorded music is problematic for us to comment on when it isn't actually regulated between the hours in which the application is seeking for the alcohol. It automatically, under Live Music Act, doesn't have to have a license for the live and recorded music. This isn't to say with this or the other application we haven't entered into dialogue with the applicant to understand what they're actually proposing. Sometimes it's difficult from an application to see actually what's applied for, can sometimes suggest it's something different to the modus operandi that's going to be proposed, and you've heard from the applicant. I'm therefore, following in relation to this application, following dialogue with the applicant, I was satisfied that the proposals were such in this location, with the history we've had from this site, from its previous usages and the lack of complaints in relation to this, that I did not have any concerns from a public nuisance perspective. And obviously we can't put conditions on the license regarding the live and recorded music because it isn't regulated. I'm happy to answer any more questions if committee requires to understand our thoughts on this one further.
Thank you. Do Councillor Gordon-Smith or Councillor Blender have any comments or questions?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Yep, I may just ask another question. Mr. Tidridge, obviously the concern that will be expressed is the level of the noise. I know we can't put restrictions on, but how's that going to, you've made some agreement, or you've come to some agreement with the owners there. What control do we actually have over that, maintaining that level?
Chair, yes, I could answer that in general terms and specific terms. As I say, we have had discussions with the applicant and made it clear that we would then expect the applicant to be following their business model, which you've heard is mainly as a coffee shop, and therefore the impact should be fairly minimal. In terms of how would we regulate it going forward, there are two options. As I understand it, obviously we always have nuisance legislation, which you're familiar with in wider terms of noise nuisance. Also, there's obviously, as you I'm sure aware, Chair, the ability to ask for a license to be reviewed. Now, when a license is reviewed, it is within the power to then put conditions and remove the permitted live and recorded music through the Live Music Act. So we could look at that. So what we've fundamentally said, and this is true of this application and the other application, which was of more concern to us, which we'll come back to, I'm sure, is if it does transpire that this does cause a problem and they're not following the assured business model and therefore the level of impact we'd imagine, we could look to request for that license to be brought in for review, called in fairly quickly thereafter. So we could either look at it again through the licensing regime, or we could look at it separately as nuisance. It's probable we would look at it initially through the licensing regime, but there are no absolute powers in terms of noise levels because I can't set those within this license because it isn't regulated.
Yeah, thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much. I have no questions on that, but I'd like you to stay around for the next licence as well, if I can. Ask that.
I will be here throughout, Chair.
Much.
Chair, could I raise a point of clarity, please?
Yes, please.
I note that the applicant's representative and Phil Tidridge have referred to the entertainment as deregulated throughout, but I would like to add that the applicant has requested that live music and recorded music go on to 2 AM on New Year's Eve. So the music would be regulated beyond 11 PM. So if you did consider that conditions were necessary to mitigate the adverse impact on the prevention of public nuisance licensing objective, you may seek to apply conditions to music beyond 11 PM on that New Year's Eve day.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Do we have anybody else that wishes to speak?
No, Chair, no indications.
Would the applicant like to clarify any points that have been raised?
Chair, I would just say that I'd only be reiterating what I'd said at the beginning. So, and I can't see that you want to listen to me just repeating what I've said. So at that point, I'll say no.
Are the other members of the committee want to ask any further questions?
I don't have any further questions.
Councillor Bento?
No, not from me either, thank you.
Very much. We shall retire then to make our decision.
Chair, if I could just ask Councillor Bento and Councillor Gordon-Smith just to stay there for a moment. I'll move everybody into a separate meeting.
Fine. Okay.
But yeah, if members could just stay there for a moment or two. Take me a few minutes, but
shall I stop the audio recording at this stage?
Yes, please, Dave.
Can I just clarify, do you want the applicant and myself to log off, or do you want us to wait here? Whichever's most convenient for you, I'm perfectly happy with, but I just want to make sure in terms of protocol we get it right.
Stay where you are, and we'll rejoin when we've finished.
Thank you very much indeed.
And we're unmuted, yeah.
Right, thank you, everybody. In reaching the decision, the subcommittee has carefully considered the application, the representations made by people and the applicants given today. We have taken into account the council's statement of licensing policy, the Home Office guidance issued under S182 of the Licensing Act 2003, the duties under the Crime and Disorder Act of 1998, and the rights set out in the Human Rights Act of 1998. The subcommittee has concluded that the application should be granted with the conditions set out in the officer's report. We have considered whether any additional representations should be restrictions should be imposed in relationship to the 2 AM on New Year's Eve, but in view of the location and the nature of the business, we do not consider any further restrictions are necessary. We welcome the applicant's withdrawal of the off-sales element of the application, and our decision is made for the following reasons. In order to promote the licensing objectives and prevention of public nuisance and the prevention of crime and disorder, the parties will be formally notified of the decision in writing shortly This notification will include details of the right of appeal against the decision to the Magistrates Court, which must be made within 28 days of the notification.
So that's 21 days, Chair.
Sorry, 21 days. Apologies. And that concludes this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Good morning. I'm everybody. This is a Winchester being held under the provisions of the Licensing Act 2003, which permits the use of remote technology for this hearing to take place virtually. My name is Councillor Brian Laming, Chairperson of the subcommittee. There are a few housekeeping matters we need to run through. First of all, can I please ask everyone present in this virtual meeting that your microphones remain muted and your camera is turned off whilst you are not addressing the meeting, as this will reduce background noise and avoid any unintentional disturbances. Can I please advise you that the opening parts of this meeting will be held, are being audio recorded, and they can be found next to the meeting's details where the recording will remain thereafter. The opening parts of the MS Teams meetings will also be recorded with the video uploaded to the Council's YouTube channel after the meeting. Members and officers, where appropriate for each item, please use the chat function on the meeting to indicate that you wish to speak or to raise a point of order. Explanation. I will invite you then to speak at the appropriate time. Each member will be invited to speak in turn. Therefore, I would encourage all members to keep your contributions as clear and concise as possible, please. When speaking and referring to the agenda papers, please make sure that you reference the page or paragraph number. Thank you. Please, can I now ask the Democratic Services Officer to undertake a roll call of members of the subcommittee to confirm who is present this morning?
Thank you, Chair. Members of the subcommittee, that you can see and hear me. Councillor Laming, I can obviously see and hear in the room. Councillor Bento?
Yes, present.
Thank you. And Councillor Gordon-Smith?
Yes, I'm present.
Thank you. Chair, would you also like me to do a rundown of the officers in the meeting? Thank you, Chair. So in the Guildhall with us this morning, we have Bryony Appleton from the licensing team, Fiona Sutherland from the legal team, and myself and Dave Shaw from Democratic Services. Joining us online also from Democratic Services, we have Claire Buchanan and Phil Tidridge from the Environmental Health team. In addition, Chair, we've got a number of members of the public. If you'd like me to just do a quick roll call just to confirm.
Yes, please.
Members of the public. If members of the public and visiting councillors could just confirm they can see and hear me as I go through the list, that would be much appreciated. Mr. Borden,
yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
Charlotte Vaughan. Charlotte. Chair. Graham Vaughan.
Hello.
Is that?
Yes, camera. Put the camera on. Shall I put the camera on?
Hello, yes, here.
Is that Vaughan and Graham Vaughan?
Yes, Graham Vaughan's here.
Hello.
Dr. Williams. Dr. Williams? You're muted, Dr. Williams, I'm afraid.
Okay, I'm here. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Right.
Kerry Park?
Yes, present.
Thank you. John Marshall?
Yes, present.
Andrew Vaughan?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Tim Rowe?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy?
Good morning, I'm present.
Thank you. And Fiona Mather? Haven't seen Fiona Mather join the meeting, Chair, so we'll check to see whether she's having any issues joining.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Vaughan. Say hello, Mrs. Vaughan.
Hello, it's Mrs. Vaughan here. I'm present.
Sorry, did I not call you? Sorry, I thought I called you.
I don't think so.
Is that Elizabeth Vaughan?
That's right. Yes.
Thank you.
The hearings require that the discussion by the subject examination will not normally be allowed. We'll be following the adopted procedures for these hearings, which are set out on the reverse of the agenda paper. Each party will be allowed equal maximum time to exercise their rights to the hearing. I will exercise my discretion to allow additional time if necessary, taking into account the requirement to allow all parties equal maximum time. Only those points contained within the written representations, the report and supplementary documents can be raised. No new evidence can be considered except with the agreement of all parties. I invite the applicant and premises licence holder representatives here to introduce themselves.
Cliff Morris, I'm from Paris Smith and I represent the applicant in this application.
Okay. The subcommittee has read all the written comments on the application, which are included in the report. I understand that there are persons present who wish to address the subcommittee on this particular application. We can only consider the issues relating to the 4 licensing objectives: prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, prevention of public nuisance, protection of children. The subcommittee will also have a regard to the national guidance and the council's licensing report policy. Could I ask the licensing manager to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So this is agenda item 2, and that begins on page 51 of your report bundle. This application is for the grant of a new premises licence under section 17 of the Licensing Act 2003. The application proposes to supply alcohol for consumption on and off the premises between the hours of 9 AM and 10 PM Monday to Sunday, and between the hours of 9 AM and 2 AM on New Year's Eve. The application also proposes the provision of regulated entertainment in the form of live music and recorded music. However, please may I remind members that both live music and recorded music are deregulated between the hours of 8 AM and 11 PM if they occur on premises licensed for the sale of alcohol for consumption on those premises. The full application can be seen in Appendix 1 to the report, that's pages 65 to 85. No representations have been received from responsible authorities. Conditions were agreed between the applicant and Hampshire Constabulary and Environmental Health during the consultation period, which are set out in section 5 of the report. A representative from Environmental Health is present at the hearing today in an advice. Does the committee have any questions? Representations were received from 30 other persons, all of which are against the application. May I also remind members that only those other persons who have made written representation may address the subcommittee, and that those persons may only refer to matters included in their written representation. If the subcommittee were minded to grant this licence, there are conditions set out in section 5 of the report to consider. The subcommittee may reword these as they feel appropriate in order to promote the licensing objectives. Let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Bento, have you any questions for the officer?
No questions, thank you.
Councillor Gordon-Smith?
No, not at the moment, thank you.
Yeah. I have no questions either, so that's good. What the applicant? Sorry, I've got some place in. The applicant, would you like to make a representation to us?
Certainly, Chair. Thank you very much indeed. This is an application for a new premises licence in respect of the Coffee Lab Academy at 18A Little Minster Street. For those that weren't here for the earlier hearing in respect of the square, I would point out that whilst the Coffee Lab Academy Limited is a separate company, it is all under the same umbrella. So as far as my client's business is concerned, it is primarily a coffee outlet, and what it wants to do is to have the chance to sell alcohol to those patrons that are using the premises afternoon and evenings that maybe don't want caffeine or don't want a coffee or similar, and that wish to sit with their friends and take some alcohol. So that's primarily what the license application is for. It is not for a backdoor pub or a backdoor wine bar. It is quite simply so that they can enhance their existing business model. Now, I would also point out that having spoken to the applicant about this application, and I'm confirming this today, the application for off sales, as with the previous application, is not something that my client intends to pursue. So as far as we're concerned from that basis, we are withdrawing the application for off sales from the premises, so it'll be on sales only. Again, touching on the question of live music, which I know we've had the discussion that apart from the 2 a.m. on New Year's Eve part, it's effectively unregulated. My client, I don't want to say, I can't say will not be pursuing that aspect of the application, but can I say the following discussions, it's been agreed that they will not be looking to have live music at the venue at any stage. It's not part of their ongoing business model going forward. So whilst I can't say it's effectively withdrawn, because theoretically there's no requirement for it anyway, apart from for the 2 a.m. on New Year's Eve, but that won't be part of their application going forward either, in that they're perfectly prepared not to have live music at the venue, and I don't know whether it's appropriate for them to give an undertaking or similar to deal with that aspect, and I'll leave that to your legal advisors there as to how that is best broached. But as I say, that bit will be withdrawn. The idea of background music or recorded music is that it will be background music. I hesitate to use the term elevator music, but it is literally there for a background. It's not intended to even have a live DJ or something like that playing anything. It is background music so that people will hear it whilst they sit and have a coffee. I would also point out that there is no intention for my clients to have any draft alcohol on sale. It will all be bottled, and it is for consumption on the premises only. So it's bottled wine, spirits and beer, not draft beer. And you've heard that the provision for alcohol is only until 10 o'clock in the evening anyway. So I hope that alleviates anyone's concern as far as this matter is concerned, that there is a backdoor attempt to turn it into a pub shut after 10 o'clock. And so clearly those looking to have consumption of large amounts of alcohol are probably very unlikely to go to a premises that's going to shut at 10. As I say, the primary objective is a coffee venue with the ability to serve alcohol to its patrons. It has been an existing business there, so there are clientele that use it, and as I say, their demographic is quite clear, that it is people primarily wanting to drink coffee and do work, as you see in a lot of places like that. And sometimes maybe later in the evening they prefer a bottle of beer to do it rather than with a coffee. And that's the intention for the terms of the application. It does serve food, but it's not a restaurant, so it's not going to try and get backdoor restaurant conditions and turn it into a different venue than it is. I understand that the premises before that was in the same location was a tea room. So it is something that's been there for a while in terms of the facility, although obviously it's not had an alcohol facility until then. So quite simply, to sum up, off sales is withdrawn. Live music is not something that my client intends to pursue, and obviously there have been discussions with the Environmental Health Department who have raised concerns over that, but it's not something they will pursue. But I don't know how to get round that in terms of maybe it's something you could potentially impose a condition for in terms of live music. I'm not sure. As I say, you'll have to take legal advice, but essentially that's the position that my clients adopt. It's to enhance their current business model and to allow them to serve a mixture of drinks to patrons that attend there. Unless anyone's got any questions for me, that would be the submission of the applicant at this stage.
Thank you. Councillor Gordon-Smith, have you any comments or questions you'd like to raise?
No, that was pretty clear. Thank you.
Councillor Bento?
No, I'm happy with that presentation. Thank you.
Very much. I have no further questions on that either.
Chair, may I clarify something with Mr. Morris? The applicant does not intend to use live music or recorded music beyond background music at their premises. Does that mean that you are withdrawing the regulated entertainment that would be live music after 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. on New Year's Eve and recorded music from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. on New Year's Eve?
As I say, the idea is that the music, background music, it would be background music. So I think from that perspective, probably yes is the answer. And I say probably because, of course, there may be some question as to the level of background music volume as to what that equates to. I'm not sure that it's defined by terms of decibels, so I have to be slightly careful in saying it is a removal of it for recorded music. It's certainly a removal of it for live music. I just hesitate on the recorded music simply because background to somebody may not be background to somebody else, and unless and we don't want to get into the stage of audible from 2 meters away from somebody outside, which is a bit sort of a grey area. So I would say that can we keep the recorded music in simply because I don't want to say no because of the background music volume question.
Thank you very much. Our environmental health representative may be able to offer some clarity on recorded music for the committee.
Okay. There are no responsible authorities present at this hearing or registered representations on this matter, but I would like to ask Mr. Titheridge to put the council's point of view on the environmental side of it.
Thank you, Chair. I know we have discussed some of this, sort of the concept of our position regarding the interplay of licensing and the Live Music Act. I will repeat that because I am aware there are quite a few people present for this part of the meeting that weren't present previously. As has been mentioned by the licensing officer, a lot of the live and recorded music is deregulated, so it doesn't form part of this application. Obviously, things have changed a little since I was last looking at this, as the applicant has now indicated their intent to not have live music. So fundamentally, what we're looking at here from our perspective is, does this license predominantly for the sale of alcohol on site result from an environmental health point of view in a failure to meet the licensing objective regarding public nuisance? In coming to that conclusion, I have to consider what's there previously, i.e. what can occur without the alcohol license. So we're really looking at, in this premises, would the granting of that license for alcohol result in a greater impact than what could currently occur without that license? Based on what you've heard from the applicant in terms of their business model, and we have to consider this is, albeit a quieter area, it is still part of the town centre economy area. So it is an area where we'd expect some such activities to take place. But I am aware, of course, by the number of people who are present here today, that this is of concern and a sensitive location and is a more difficult decision. We've talked about the deregulated music, and the applicant has already indicated their intents regarding that. I'm not you probably will need to get a legal opinion on this, but my understanding is I don't in reality see how we're going to necessarily condition that out. My understanding is, however, should it cause a problem, I would be in, and a license was granted at this stage. Obviously, there's always a regime present for a license to be called in for review. Should it transpire it does cause a problem, particularly if live music does occur or recorded music beyond background, which we consider to be regulated, occurs and causes a problem, I have indicated previously to the applicant in discussions, I would be looking to call that license into review. My understanding, which you may wish to clarify legally, is in a review situation, you do have the ability to then impose such conditions that are otherwise granted by the Live Music Act. So there would be, my understanding, in a review situation, your ability at that stage to condition that out. However, I would hasten, I am environmental health, and you may wish to have a legal opinion regarding that to make sure I'm correct. So that is why, on balance, we did not make a representation regarding this, because what we're looking at really is the alcohol side of things, and we have to take to some extent the word of the applicant as to what they're intending. That is, however, balanced very much against, if that doesn't transpire, we would be looking at calling the licence in for review pretty quickly, and the applicant has been advised that in discussions with us. Further to those discussions, also we have recommended to the applicant, who then proposed these, some conditions regarding public nuisance. Those can be imposed, as I understand it, because they relate to the wider context of public nuisance and not public nuisance just caused by the live and recorded music element. And because of the live recorded music isn't regulated, we can't impose conditions relating specifically to the live and recorded music, but we can impose conditions that relate to public nuisance in the wider context. So the conditions I've suggested are limited by that and relate to the wider context, and that's what the applicant has agreed to, and you will see is proposed in the licence. I am aware this is a application of concern, and it is a difficult decision for you. Hopefully that has given you some steer as to why environmental health hasn't made a representation ultimately, but it is with those caveats and those reassurances. But I appreciate this is a decision for yourselves, and it is a difficult one. If I haven't clarified our position, I'm happy to answer or clarify further questions, Chair.
Thank you very much. I hope that helps people understand the process that we're looking at and how it can be made. It needs management. So thank you for that. Representations. Where are we? Sorry. I would like to ask the public speakers to carry on. So can I first ask and Celia Galloway?
Good morning, Cecilia Galloway. I'm speaking on behalf of myself and my husband Paul. Our objection was under the public nuisance, and on two counts. First of all, noise, and whilst I welcome the intentions not to produce live music, we have experience of live music and recorded music in another premises, in another time, in another authority, and we do know that noise and vibrations travel significantly, and in a building which has got 6 residences, as well as what was initially a retail unit, we anticipate that that will cause a public nuisance. Secondly, where there is alcohol, there is unfortunately usually smoking as well, and we believe that smoking in terms of pollution as well as in terms of litter will cause a nuisance as well. There will be no smoking within the building, obviously because of legislation, but it will therefore transfer outside. And those are our two areas of concern.
Thank you. Is it?
Chair, you may ask questions of
Yeah,
Mr. and Mrs.
thank you. I appreciate that. Does council have any questions, please? Councillor Bento?
No question.
Councillor Smith?
Yes, could you clarify, do you live above the premises, so to speak?
Yes, we live at number 5.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have no further questions. So thank you for coming and making your points. Could I ask Charlotte Vaughan, please, to make her representation? And this refers to pages 123 to 124. I'm sorry, you're muted.
Can you hear me? Right, yes. Firstly, I would like to make objections to this licence application on a number of grounds. But I wanted to sort of give an overview, really, that my in-laws live in the Mazetta above, directly above Coffee Lab. And they're both OAPs, and obviously our concern for them is paramount. So that's one of the objections, really. But on the things that we would like to sort of discuss today as regarding the sort of the crime and disorder in the local area that the late alcohol licence would bring. Sort of at the moment, quite often there's drinking going on at the moment without an establishment there. So you know, there's drug use as well in the town centre. So I think by having this late licence, although till just 10 o'clock, it would significantly increase that, and that would have a detrimental effect on the health of my in-laws, who are 85 and also 95. And that's not the intention when they moved there. It was a trade building, you know, and having that late licence will significantly increase that sort of crime and disorder and sort of and yeah, I'm looking for a word that's not coming to me. So yeah, so firstly that is one of the reasons, but also let me just pull up my email. Yeah. So the public safety as well, because obviously if the late night drinking will go on till 10 o'clock and people will sort of be sitting out on the streets during the summer, for example, and that's going to cause, you know, it's a safety issue as well. So there's sort of the public safety issue as well. And it will attract the wrong type of customers as well to the area, which don't come currently if you're just drinking coffee, and also it's the prevention of public nuisance as well, the grounds that I'm objecting to, and I suppose in summary, I just like to, you know, they're at the end of basically the end of their lives, and this is causing a really stressful situation for them. The thought that late night drinking is going to occur just literally down from where they live and sleep. I really object on that reason, due to the safety of other of them. And I think if we look at all the other drinking establishments in the city of Winchester, which there are many, there's no need for an extra one, really. And if you look at all the other ones, there's no residential, the majority, there's no residential accommodation or anything above them. And for OAPs to be living there and to have this, I just think that it's just not necessary, and something that can be avoided. So that's why my overall is to object to this licence application.
Thank you. Do councillors have any other questions for this lady? Councillor Bento?
No, thank you.
I don't have any questions either.
Neither do I. Thank you very much for coming today.
That's all right, thank you.
Could I ask Vaughan now to address it? Refer to pages 125 to 26.
Sorry, can you repeat whose name you called?
Sorry, Chairman, we didn't quite catch that.
Graham Vaughan. I don't think he's. I don't think Mr.
Hello. Graham Vaughan here.
Yeah.
Hello. Hello. I think we're getting some feedback.
You're on here.
We are getting feedback. If you can turn off your cameras if you're not speaking, please.
Graham, you should only have one microphone on between the pair of you, or one set of speakers.
Yeah, we have, yes.
Why don't you come here? No.
Hello.
That's much better, Mr. Vaughan. Yeah, thank you.
Hello.
Can you hear us, Mr. Vaughan?
Oh yes. What was I saying? I just left my mother. Yeah, basically, just like my wife just said, just reiterating what she said as well, and also the drug use was actually taking part in the building during the day and night time, which there was needles and all drug paraphernalia, which was seen. I've got photos of this, which was left numerous times just round the back of Coffee Lab, which they have a door, which they have not reported when it was broken. So giving them a license, a drinking license, and with them saying that it's only going to be for beers, I really don't believe this. I think it's a backdoor entrance so they can have parties, which they've had before. Previously, they've had private parties there, which have kept my mother and father up until 11 o'clock, which they've had just background music, which they can hear in the flat just above the Coffee Lab. And by the way, the lawyer said that the previous tenant of Coffee Lab was a tea room, which is misleading because it wasn't. I don't know why he said that. It was a retail unit. There was no tea or anything being served at all. And with the crime, it's a residential area. It's not a nighttime economy at all. There's no other nighttime economy there. It's all in the square. There is no. It's behind. There's buildings behind that you see. There's no entrances to the pubs or the restaurants from Little Minster Street or King's Head Yard at all. So I don't know. The guy from the council said that this nighttime economy here. There is no night economy in Little Minster Street at all. So I don't know where he's getting that information from. Maybe he should come and have a look himself. And also there's a car park which is just behind Mozetta, which is constantly being used for cigarettes by the staff of Coffee Lab, and of which I have photos of this as well. And then obviously people that will be drinking will use the same area for smoking cigarettes and the like and such like, which will let which with my mother's bedroom literally outside with a big window. She'll be able to hear and see this, and it'll disturb her. And considering that she's caring, she's the main carer for my father, who's 93 and has dementia, and is pretty much bound to his bed, which will cause utter distress and probably the termination of their lives because of the stress my mother has caused having at the moment. Thank you very much. That's all I need to say. Thank you.
Do councillors have any questions?
No, thank you. That was very clear. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I ask Dr. Paul Williams to make his presentation and contain on?
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Chairman, for inviting me to this meeting. Can I say that I am also representing the views of Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, who have for 35 years lived in number 7 King's Head Yard, and their email to your committee was dated the 2nd of April 2021. Now, they have asked me to stress that this postcode area, SO239HB, is primarily residential. The few commercial properties here normally have closed by 6 p.m. every night. Their house, number 7, King's Head Yard, is the closest to Coffee Lab. Their windows all look across King's Head Yard and are only a few feet away from the door and the windows of Coffee Lab. Their main concern is the constant noise from early in the morning until late at night, from customers arriving and leaving, and from amplified and recorded music being played daily for up to 15 hours. They wish to state in the strongest terms possible that the granting of this application would result in a serious public nuisance and in their quality of life being greatly diminished. I'd now like to talk on behalf of myself. My name is Paul Williams and I live at number 11 King's Head Yard. I note from Coffee Lab's application for this license that, and I'm going to quote from their application, quote, "The number of people per event won't exceed 100 people," unquote. And they also state, and again I'm quoting, "The music will be amplified, but not loud enough to not have a conversation." But you see, it's not a conversation, not a conversation. It's 100 people competing with each other with amplified music, having several loud conversations. The noise level inside Coffee Lab, therefore, is likely to be considerable. And one of the previous speakers mentioned his parents, who are in the flat above, inches away from this noise. Meanwhile, the doors to Coffee Lab continue to open and shut to allow people to come and go. And each time they open, the noise inside will spill out into our streets. and our streets become noisier and noisier. There will also be groups of smokers, not only in the car parking space, which a previous gentleman mentioned, but outside my windows and outside other windows of people who live in the building directly opposite Mosetta. I'm also concerned about significantly increased traffic noise and light pollution from cars depositing and picking up Coffee Lab customers just outside my windows at number 11 King's Head Yard.
Yeah.
I need hardly mention the increased noise pollution from people's voices continuing their loud conversations late into the night as they drift home.
Thank you. And we appreciate it.
I haven't finished. I've not got much to do. Can I just have another few seconds?
So we need to see the objections you put in. So thank you.
Is that all I have?
Carry on.
Oh, thank you. Coffee Labs say only one thing about the prevention of public nuisance, only one, and here it is, and I'm quoting. They will, quote, put up notices at the exit points requesting that customers leave quietly and respect local residents, unquote. But no, we are not convinced. In the real world we live in, such glib notices don't count for much. If this license is approved, we would suffer significantly higher noise levels coming from Coffee Lab and from their customers up and down our streets. This, in my book, constitutes a very serious public nuisance. We all mention it in the numerous letters you have received, each of which puts an irrefutable case for not allowing this license to be granted, and one or two of which, as we have already heard this morning, are deeply moving. Please, members of the committee, will you take fully into consideration the great depth of feeling that this application has aroused? Thank you very much.
Any questions?
Not for me, not for me.
No, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chair, before we continue, I just clarify that those speaking must refer.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. Could I ask for Elizabeth Vaughan, please?
Hello, can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. No, I can't see myself. Am I supposed to be on here?
Could I ask?
Yes, hello.
Turn your camera off, please.
Or if I'm on there now, am I?
But I'll ask Dr. Williams to turn his camera off, please.
Camera off.
All right, thank you very much. Would you like to carry on, please?
Hello, yes. If you can hear me, I carry on. I find it extremely disturbing that there's going to be alcohol being served in Coffee Lab. The Coffee Lab has doubled in size during lockdown. Now, that would be fine with just coffee, but it would not work with alcohol. We know that. We all know it goes out of hand. I'm so stressed, I've already had a breakdown because of it. I'm looking after my husband, and I won't be able to do that properly if this noise goes on. Also, about the drug use in our property. They actually came into our hello,
Yeah.
into our rubbish room where all the bins are, and they would make themselves comfortable and inject heroin. And we know it's heroin because we saw all the debris. I phoned the police, but the police didn't take any, well, they took down the particulars, but they didn't act on it. It's extremely stressful. I'm frightened to go down there now to take my rubbish away. I don't think I could stand the music. We had the odd party taking place in the coffee shop, in the coffee bar, and there was no way we could have gone to bed that night because it was so noisy. I'm sorry. What? I would like to say that it is quite impossible for us to take this. Sorry, am I going on? Am I on screen? Anyway, I'm very stressed out now. Maybe I've made my daughter-in-law and my son have made it quite clear that we just are not able to put up with alcohol being served in the coffee bar at any time, because we know how people react. We now have young people walking by here who we know they've been drinking, and they start kicking over all the dustbins.
Yeah.
It will just increase the misbehavior. Who lives above?
Yeah, thank you very much.
100 people. We know how many. I mean, we had parties in our days. 30, 40 is enough.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Of noise. And then you ask your neighbours, please, would you mind if we have a party tonight?
Thank you very much.
It's just not possible.
Yes. Thank you very much for making your representation. Does the councillors have any questions?
Excuse me, hold on a minute. What did you want? No, thank you.
No questions, thank you, Chair.
No questions, thank you.
Very much. Mrs. Vaughan, do I ask then Celia Park to make her representation on pages 120?
Hello, right, so I'm Kerry Park. I'd like to make I'm also the owner of flat number 3, which is directly above the entrance to Coffee Lab. I'd like to make my objection on the basis of public nuisance, both in terms of noise, smoking, and late night disturbance. This is a residential block, and it would be a significant change to the current use, where we have a coffee bar, which I think we would all support, which closes at 6 o'clock. To then have a coffee bar, which, despite what the applicant is saying, it does turn itself into a bar. It seems inappropriate and quite a significant change in terms of public nuisance to the surrounding residents. I'm also one of the directors of the management company of the building, and I have to say I have no confidence in Coffee Lab adhering to their reported intentions as outlined in their application, because our experience of the applicant since they've leased this property is we've had a number of issues. And in fact, the biggest issue being that they have failed to secure the building and have allowed through the back entrance, which they control, the entry of people who are indulging in drug use, which creates a significant risk to our residents and is quite dangerous. So we've had issues on that front. We've also had issues in the terms of the communal and the way that they handle their waste, which has resulted in a visit from environmental health. So there have been issues. I'm afraid I am not confident in the applicant, regardless of what they have said, because I'm basing this on past experience. So on the basis of public nuisance and the tremendous impact that it's going to have on the residents and the surrounding residents, I strongly object to this application.
Thank you very much. Councillors, any questions?
No, thank you. That was very coherent and to the point.
Yeah, I've just got a question, if I may, please. How many residents are there actually in that block, or how many residential flats?
So the block, there's six flats in the block. So the original, when the development was built 15 years ago, the intention, the original application, the original planning license for the retail unit was retail. It wasn't for food consumption. It doesn't have the right setup and ventilation for that. But over time, that has slightly been eroded.
Right, thank you. Yes, thank you.
I have no further questions on that. So thank you very much for your presentation. Could I ask John Marshall to make his points? And we refer to pages 121 to 122.
Good afternoon and thank you very much. I'd like to object on public nuisance. I'm the owner of apartment number 1, Mazetta, which is immediately above the 2 entrance doors to Coffee Lab, and will therefore be extremely affected by the proposals. I'd like to say that there have been some private parties downstairs, and the noise, it can be heard in the apartments. It was never designed as a building to be a bar or restaurant or an entertainment venue underneath. It was always designed as retail, which is how it started, and nothing has been changed in the building regarding soundproofing at this stage, and therefore it is totally unacceptable to have live music and a restaurant and a bar underneath a block of 6 quality apartments in the centre of Winchester. I'd like to point out it's not a kind of NIMBY attitude. I own 2 residential properties in the square, and I haven't objected to Coffee Lab's application to the square because it's a completely different area to King's Head Yard. It has many cafes and bars, and I lived through the Bar 31 vodka bar problems, which managed to get sorted. And in these days, providing everybody adheres to their license conditions, then, you know, the square is a completely different area. Having said that, King's Head Yard is a quiet residential area with no other commercial activity entrances in King's Head Yard, and therefore the disturbance would be beyond belief to the apartment owners above and the neighbouring residents. The large windows in the apartments on the first floor are top hinged, so the only way of getting any ventilation is to open it from the top and hinge out, so therefore any sound from somebody coming and going will be evident in the apartment. Coffee Lab is not an owner operated company, and I think this will cause more problems. As Kerry did point out, they haven't secured the building, and we've had to go to great lengths to make our own residential areas secure because they haven't secured the back door of the building, and that obviously again has had, you know, a big impact. So in summary, the building is not designed for a bar or entertainment underneath, and the noise will transmit through, even from the music or just from that number of people talking in the building. There was a previous application in 2008 for a restaurant, which as residents we all opposed, and that was turned down. But obviously the coffee shop is a different rules and regulations. But I can't stress enough how, you know, we bought apartments in a quiet city centre location, and that's, you know, is totally unacceptable now in our view, that it becomes a bar above a residential building, below a residential building. Thank you.
Councillors, any questions?
Just one thing, you said that you spoke to the management about securing the back door.
Yes.
But they didn't react to that, or how did they respond?
When we found all the drug paraphernalia in the bin store, right, we approached them and asked them if the back door had been left unlocked at any point, and they said yes, it had, because the lock had broken sometime before, and they'd reported it to Coffee Lab head office, who had failed to report it to the managing agents. And I think it was just, you know, that's the thing. If it was the owner of the business, he would have wanted to make it secure, sure, and would have done something. It's a chain of events, and this right, is the issue that we've had all the time. Nobody takes responsibility for the business.
And are there other instances of this?
The main one was the door, which obviously was right, broken and not reported. The landlord, as the management company, have reported to the landlord the private parties which were held and disturbed the residents. So again, that's something that has been reported back to the landlord and was taken up with Coffee Lab.
But they didn't respond in any way and sort it? Or...
No, we've had no communication from Coffee Lab ever since they started as residents or the management company. We weren't consulted over this. They've had no communication with us whatsoever.
Okay, thank you very much. No more questions.
Thank you. Councillor Bento?
No, that's fair enough. Thank you.
Fine. Thank you very much. I have no further questions. So could I ask Andrew Vaughan to make his representation, referring to pages 111 to 12.
Well, good afternoon, Chairman. Thank you for the chance to speak to this application. I speak as the son of Ken and Elizabeth Vaughan. You've already heard from my mother, you've heard from my brother and my sister-in-law. I just want to speak to the issue of public nuisance, and especially for the residents of Mazetta, but also King's Head Yard, and we've already heard from some residents already. My belief is, you know, their quality of life and enjoyment of their area is going to be affected with no matter what volume of music is being promised, or due to the sale of alcohol, whether that's on site or off, or being consumed in the building or outside the building. We just know that no matter how much alcohol anybody has, it has an influence over their choices and decisions. And there's no guarantee that the noise levels within the unit below will stay at a reasonable level. And also, as people leave the building, I think John has already kind of explained that the windows are hinged at the top, and they just basically act as reflectors to any noise from around the building. So any noise below the building gets completely transferred by the windows into the units, and that could go on all night with people leaving the premises. There could be damage to local property. We've already heard about the damage to the bin store and the drug use. There's also urinating. There is an alleyway at the back that could be used by people late at night. The door entry system could get damaged by people under the influence. my brother's already said, you know, this is causing great stress to our parents and especially to my mother, who is my father's primary carer. Regarding crime and disorder, people under the influence of alcohol could damage local properties. We've heard about bins being messed around with, and generally, you know, the worry about noise, increased traffic, cabs. We've heard about that. I think a lot of this could add, you know, we bring more people to that particular residential area. I certainly understand that it is within the city centre and it's close to other commercial areas and other restaurants and bars, but that particular part is very quiet and is enjoyed by the residents of that area. Yeah, I think regarding the music, I think the committee would need to hopefully get assurance as to exactly what form of equipment is being used for background music, because there's different ways of creating background music within a unit, like downstairs. If it's just a speaker and an iPhone or something modest, then I'm sure that's very reasonable. I think that's what they already have in the shop. They have a small speaker and music coming from a digital device. But if they're thinking of bringing in speakers and a sound system, I think the committee possibly need to get legal advice, as was recommended by the environmental health officer. And I just want to say thank you for this opportunity to make my to speak to the committee.
Good. Councillors, have you any questions?
Not from me.
I think.
Thank you very much. I have questions, so thank you very much for coming along. Could I ask Tim Wright to address us?
Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm a resident in St Thomas Street, so a little bit further away from the building than other people, but I just wanted to emphasize the public nuisance point. This really is an area which is residential with some daytime businesses and shops, and it quietens down in the evening. What is proposed is moving the square towards us, and I think we think that the square is the place for that sort of entertainment, not Little Minster Street and the surrounding streets. I didn't want to say any more than that, and I didn't want to take up any more time, but I did note that what's now being applied for is much less than what was originally applied for. And I wonder actually whether a new application shouldn't be made so that people can react to what is actually now being applied for. That's all I wanted to say.
Very much for being so concise. Councillors, have you any further questions?
Not from me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I ask Councillor Linda Murphy, please, to address us?
What page 2?
And that's page 113. Yep.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Councillor Linda Murphy and I represent St Michael's ward, of which Little Minster Street is a part. As you can tell by all the speakers this morning, this application has raised lots of concerns and there are high levels of emotions. This will be a significant change to the use of the building, and it is a residential building, and I think there's no doubt that having a sort of late night alcohol licence and its related music will disturb the elderly residents in the block. So therefore I would like the committee to take notice of this, and I object to this application on the grounds of public nuisance. Thank you.
Councillors, do we have any further questions for Councillor Murphy?
Not from me.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Right.
Still have another councillor.
Sorry?
Still have another speaker.
Yes, I'll say Councillor, sorry, as Fiona Mather.
Chair, we have been in touch with Fiona and she won't be able to join us today.
Okay, thank you very much. Would the applicant like to address any of these points that have been raised today?
Certainly, Chair. Thank you very much indeed. My clients have indeed responded, if I can put it that way, to the concerns of the local residents by amending their application to remove the live music indication, also to remove the off sales. As I reiterate, the premises are actually due to stop serving alcohol at 10 o'clock, so an early finish to actually discourage late night drinkers and revellers looking for their premises as a further watering hole on their way home or similar. That's the reason for doing it. My client has also listened to these concerns and has indicated that they're in the process of putting in some acoustic shielding to help ameliorate the noise criteria to those immediately around them. And it's one of the things that, as I say, they want to have a working relationship with local residents. Whilst I've been here, Mr. Fellows, who is also on the call, has indicated he is perfectly prepared to give those residents that require it his direct telephone number so that they can contact him day or night with concerns about the property. So that if there are issues, for example, like the bin store with the lock, that can be acted on straight away, because he would be the person to be able to authorise the work to be done without any further intermediary by contacting the people that are in the premises down below. So he's certainly prepared to take that step to go forward and allow them to indeed deal with him directly in concerns of any noise or nuisance that they've got. I would reiterate, as I have done before, that this is an existing business as coffee sales, and what they're looking to do is expand their clientele. And as has been said before, with regard to the previous application, I accept that this is something that the objectors to this application won't have heard. Whilst my client has applied for licensing hours in the hours that they have, it is imagined and indeed proposed that it will be a gradual increase to those hours if and when demand for it appears. If, for example, as is the current scenario, and let's just take a Monday night, for example. Monday nights are relatively quiet nights. There are not necessarily at this stage the requirement for it to be open beyond 6:30, 7 o'clock in the evening, and under those circumstances it's highly unlikely that it would remain open even if there is an alcohol licence there for it. If there isn't the demand, they won't utilise that aspect of the licence. But the position is that they applied quite rightly for the licence to the maximum hours they would intend to operate, and then obviously see how the business model takes it and how it goes. My clients are concerned to work with residents and not have a head-butting approach. They don't want to be the sore thumb sticking out and ruining relationships. So they do want to work with, as I say, quite happily, they are fitting acoustic shielding. Some money on doing that. They are also prepared to provide a direct contact phone number for any concerns to the local residents or the local residents management group, or whichever way they prefer to deal with it, if they want one point of contact or whatever. So that would even deal with issues that they consider to be noise on a daily basis, if that's something that needs to be dealt with. With regard to smoking, my clients don't have the frontage, if I can call it that, or the facility for a pavement license. So people, as a rule, don't tend to go outside, have a cigarette and come back in. That is not part of the practice at this stage. Certainly if my clients have given an indication that if they see people going out literally just to have a cigarette below the windows, they will not allow them to stay there and will move them on. If the demand and the requirement for what's operating there appears to be an area for more smokers, then my client will enter into discussions and has agreed to do that with both residents, local authority and the police to ensure that any pollution from that is kept to an absolute minimum and moved away from residential areas. Those are really the comments that I can make at that. As you will appreciate, being a new licence with extended hours, it is a bit of a more difficult proposition to say we will do this and we will do that in terms of what I can only consider at this stage to be hypothetical issues, and that's not to denigrate the concerns of the residents, which I can perfectly understand. But a lot of the comments they're making with regard to traffic noise, and that is purely hypothetical at this stage, not something to which my clients can obviously answer. And indeed, allegations with regard to already noise and disturbance from people that may have drunk alcohol coming back and damaging property is not something that can be laid at my client's door, because they haven't got an alcohol license to do that, and they're not open to that stage of the night. So, as I say, whilst they have the concerns, I think it's a little bit harsh to say that these would be issues that they could respond to, because at the moment, and I don't want to just put my sort of it's not our responsibility hat on, but these incidents aren't emanating from our client's facility. So I think that really sums up where we are and what my clients would say with regard to those points. Of course, as I say, they are perfectly willing to enter into dialogue with local residents, and under those circumstances, I would say that completes what I have to say, unless you have any further questions for me arising out of the points made.
The subcommittee will now retire.
Chair, did you have any questions?
No, I don't. Sorry, I don't have any questions. Does any of the other council?
No questions from me, thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you. That was perfectly clear, and appreciate that. So we will now retire to make our decisions.
Would it be possible to just ask a question on a technicality?
Who's that?
John Marshall.
Please, go ahead.
Section 521, it does mention the proposal for outside front seating, which the representative from Coffee Lad said that they weren't going to have, but it does mention it on there.
Thanks.
Sir, if I can assist on that point, there was an issue with regard to front seating that my clients originally, at the time of making the application, were proposed to look to do. Following discussions with the local authority, it became abundantly clear that it was impossible for them to do this, because they required the consent of the local residents to have outside front seating, and without that consent, the local authority will not look at granting them a pavement licence. So whilst they put that in, it's effectively been, I don't want to, how can I phrase it? It's been decided already that it can't proceed, because the local residents, quite rightly in their view, have decided that they don't want pavement seating. So without that, there's not a possibility for my clients to get a pavement licence under the edicts of the local authority.
And the rear covered garden seating?
Your worships, I can't actually comment on that, because obviously the application as it is at the moment is for what it is inside of the premises with regard to the licence. So there is no current application for outside.
It does say on section 5, rear covered garden seating you'd like to create.
Yes, no. What I'm pointing out is that the plan actually only indicates the internals of the building.
Thank you.
I think that's covered that point. So if we'd now like to go and make it a decision, so if you'd like to carry on back here.
Chair, I think licensing officer just like to.
Sorry, Chair, just to clarify before you go into deliberation, I know we had a number of people speak today who may have strayed slightly from their written representations. So just a reminder that you can only take into account points that were raised in written representations, and that any new points raised today may only be considered where that information was unavailable at the time of the person making their representation. For example, where someone may have quoted part of an application, you can take that into consideration. Thank you.
No, I appreciate you points up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. For the benefit of the members of the public, Chair, so the members of the subcommittee are going to leave this meeting, but everybody else is more than welcome to stay here, and members of the subcommittee will come back when they're ready.
Thank you.
Okay, we should all be back in the main meeting again. I'll just start the meeting off with a quick roll call of members of the subcommittee, if that's okay. Councillor Lamy, I can see and hear. Councillor Bento?
Yep, I'm here.
Councillor Gordon-Smith?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you, members. Chair, that's all members of the subcommittee present.
In reaching the decision of the subcommittee, has carefully considered the application, the representation made by the persons and the applicant's evidence given today. It has taken into account the council's statement of licensing policies, the Home Office guidance issued under Section 182 of the Licensing Act 2003, the duties under the Crime and Disorder Act of 1998, and set out in the Human Rights Act of 1998, and the public sector equality duties in relationship to people with characteristics. The subcommittee has concluded that the application should be granted, conditions and changes that set out in the officer's report. Live music, none is proposed. Recorded music, Monday to Sunday, from 8 AM to 1900 hours, including New Year's Eve. The hours of the premises may be used for the sale of alcohol should be Monday to Sunday, 9 AM to 1900 hours, including New Year's Eve. And it is noted that the application for offline sales has been withdrawn. And the following conditions have been a written procedure in relation to the proximity of the smoking of tobacco outside the premises and the requirement that this must be adhered to. The reason for the decision are to promote the licensing objectives and the prevention of public nuisance, public safety and the prevention of crime and disorder. In reaching the decision, we have carefully weighed up business requirements and the impact on residents in this area and specifically the immediate area. The reduction in hours, we believe, and additional conditions mitigate any of the issues of public nuisance, safety and potential for crime and disorder. The parties will be formally notified of the decision in writing shortly. This notification will include the details of the right to appeal against this decision to the Magistrates' Court, and which should be made within 21 days of the notification. And that concludes this meeting. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.